Hello again guys, and welcome back to another Big Al Devlin video. I am Big Al Devlin. So this video is a focus video, very small, very small introduction focus video on the god Loki. Now I know Loki is a particular favourite of, I think, of Celtic god. He asked me to sort of really give Loki some real good give him justice by going into detail everything about him, because he is an incredibly interesting god. He's perhaps, out of all of them, the most interesting god of the lot, because he has so many good points but so many flaws also, but is so commonly represented as just a purely evil god or character, whatever, that it's unfair. He's given such a bad reputation by modern pop culture, and during the Victorian times, when sort of Norse mythology was very popular and sort of bastardized. Loki has been given a very poor representation, and almost represents like the devil in modern society, modern Christian society, in that. But he's far from that. Loki is a very multifaceted character, god. He has many faces, many guises, many elements to him to consider. And this video is really just going to be my personal view on what I see Loki as, what I wouldn't do with Loki, what I would do with Loki, whatever, and just to give you the basics on his genealogy. Now we're going to start with the boring stuff, that's the facts, and then I'll tell you what I think of Loki myself. And then what we'll do is probably going to be at least half a dozen videos on Loki. Not all in one go, obviously, but throughout the series, as the series develops, you'll see the character of Loki develop and further discussions being made. Now, I do want to make one point clear. In Nordic paganism, he isn't liked. So I know there's a featured channel here on House of Devlin called Celtic God, and the runner of that channel. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. Can I just have a drink for 1 second? The runner of that channel is a Celtic paganist, and I know he asked me to do, as I say, a big feature on Loki. This was a while back, a few months back. This is the first chance I've really sort of found it sort of time appropriate to sort of begin to get my teeth sunk into such a topic. But if he's looking from a Nordic pagan, a typical Nordic paganist viewpoint of Loki, he really is represented poorly. I know I've just said that, he's been misrepresented like the devil and all the rest of it in modern pop culture, Victorian bastardizations and that. But in the Nordic text, he isn't liked. I'm not gonna beat around the bush. He's not liked, but I think that by reading deeper into the text, there's more there to be seen than simply what is represented on the surface. He may not be liked by the people, the Nordic people. You may never pray to him, and I'll get into that later at the end of the video when I give my personal views. Would I ever pray to Loki, for example? But personally, in my personal opinion, I have some affection for Loki. He is, in my opinion, a misrepresented god, both within his own religion and in things that have come to pass since the religion, in pop culture and stuff like that. Let's do the boring stuff. Loki himself was one of the Aesir tribe. Okay, so he was part of the he lived in Asgard, essentially. He came from Asgard, and he had a very kind of strange position within Asgard, because he was always in trouble, but then always correcting the troubles and stuff. But his father, well, this is the interesting bit. I'm not 100% sure why he lives in Asgard. From what I've seen, it's never actually been answered. Why does Loki live in Asgard? Why is Loki one of the Aesir? I know that Odin favoured him for some reason, or at least protected him, because perhaps maybe deep down Odin realised that Ragnarok was an essential thing that needed to happen. An end must come to everything. Nothing can last forever, and Loki is the prime culprit for Ragnarok. Without Loki, you don't have Ragnarok, essentially, which is the Viking apocalypse. So maybe Odin kept him along and tolerated him as much as he did. Maybe Odin did that because, despite the fact that Odin was a conflicted character, Odin spent his an almost entire existence throwing pebbles, really, into, as described by Celtic God, pebbles into the weaves of fate, trying to stop his death, trying to prevent Ragnarok. He tried to have an almost a boulder-like effect by throwing so many pebbles at the weaves of fate, that he might make some kind of change. He failed, and I think he knew he was going to fail in that. But regardless, he was a stubborn god. He kept on trying and trying and trying. He kept on trying to change fate, or his own fate at least, anyway, and the fate of the Asgardians, which was death. Okay, but at the same time, I think Odin is one of those, because even though he was slightly chaotic in his own character, he was very much a character of, or his character was very much one of order. Also, he was the king of the Asgardians. He knew order. He knew the way of things. He knew the way that things had to be done. He knew life and death, the cycles. He understood. He was the wisest of the gods, and the wisest of the gods, the wisest being in all existence, he'd surely understand. He'd probably think that, no, I cannot make a difference to fate. What is a futile attempt? So why did he keep trying? Well, that was his stubbornness. But I think, to compensate for his inability to let go of the subject, his inability to swallow his pride, or swallow his Viking spirit, to fight to the death, more to the point, to try and fight to make a change right to the end, he instead tolerated Loki and let him live within Asgard, to compensate for his own sort of weirdness, I suppose. He tolerated him, and he did protect him. He protected Loki at points when Loki could have been easily executed for his crimes. And I think Odin actually allowed Loki to live, because he knew that Ragnarok was an essential process that needed to happen, despite the fact he fought so hard to stop it. And I think, to be honest, trying to understand a god's motives is very difficult, because they are, they're not supreme beings within Viking or Nordic paganism, but they are incredibly powerful, old, and experienced beings. And for us to get into their mindset is like a dog trying to understand us, for example. It's not going to happen. We can have guesses, perhaps, because we have insight into things, but we can't really try to understand his thought processes. But that's my understanding, at least anyway, of what he was trying to do. He took Loki on and kept him alive long enough for him to bring along Ragnarok, because for the reasons I've mentioned. I'm going on. This video is supposed to be a brief introduction to Loki, but I've spoken a lot about Odin there. But it's nice to see, to talk about the links that do exist, regardless, when they do pop up. But Loki, as I say, one of the weird things is, and the reason what brought me on to why did Odin have him in Asgard, why did he protect him in that, is because, strictly speaking, was he Aesir? Was he of the Aesir tribe? Was he Asgardian? Because his father was a giant called Farbuti, which means cruel striker. And his mother, Loafe, is a goddess of unknown origins. So she may have been an Aesir, she may have been a giantess, or she could have been something all completely different. And I actually am of that opinion, that his mother was something completely different, because Loki's such an integral, important character to the whole life cycle of not ourselves as such, or even though he does bring across the destruction of the mortal realms as well, but he is the important sort of beginning of the end point for the gods themselves. He brings that which cannot be killed, essentially. He brings them to death. He brings Armageddon to their doorsteps. And so I feel that personally, his mother was something completely different. Maybe she was a Norn. Who knows? That's an interesting thought. Norns are the sort of protectors of fate, essentially, within Viking mythology. They tend to fate. And if, obviously, Ragnarok, which it is an absolute essential. You can't have creation without destruction, and you cannot have destruction without creation. Maybe the mother, the mother of Loki, was one of the Norns, and that would explain his sort of why he's so strongly linked into, or his fate is so strongly linked into the bringing on of Ragnarok. Okay, he had, and just to show you just how much of an influence he had on Ragnarok. Okay, he had one legitimate child. Okay, with his wife Sigjin, which means friend of victory, and it was a son called Nari, or sometimes called Nafi, which means corpse. Loki doesn't give nice names to his children, okay? But that was his legitimate son, okay, amongst the Aesir. But he also had illegitimate children, many of them as well, to the giant, by the giantess Angrboda. Now, Angrboda was the mother of the following children, and this a brief description of what they were. Hel, okay? So Hel was the goddess of the underworld. Hel ruled over Hell. She was named Hel because she lived in Hell, and she wasn't a very nice particular goddess, giantess either herself. Well, half god, half giantess, whatever she is. She brings an army of the dead to attack Asgard during Ragnarok, and has a major part to play in the sacking of Asgard as a result, and the destruction of both Midgard and Asgard. Jormungand, this was the great Midgard world serpent that lives in the seas of Midgard and can wrap itself around Midgard and bite its own tail. It's so huge and so big. Jormungand brings the beginning of Ragnarok by poisoning the skies with his venom and slaying Thor. Thor comes down to challenge Jormungand. Thor kills Jormungand, but Jormungand actually had bitten Thor during the fight, and his poisons kill Thor moments after Thor's victory. So Jormungand's a big, I mean, so far we've got out of two of his children so far, at least two illicit children. We've got Hel, essentially the devil, okay, but in Viking times. Jormungand, who kills Thor. Imagine that, for killing Thor, the most powerful of all the Aesir gods. Okay, you've got Fenrir. Fenrir was one of Loki's children, who bites off the hands of Tyr. Sorry, Celtic god, I know you love Tyr. I know he's your top god, but Fenrir, I don't know, is it the same in Celtic mythology? Please tell me. But in Ragnarok, he bites the hands off Tyr and kills Odin. During Ragnarok, tears out his throat, and he has a couple of other children as well, which are sort of less mute points. But you can see just from his children, the role he plays in Ragnarok is huge, just through his progeny alone. He himself kills Heimdall. Okay, Heimdall's the guardian of Asgard. Okay, he also gets killed by Heimdall, but there's a lot of I kill you, you kill me during Ragnarok. But Loki is very much an antagonistic individual within the Nordic tales, and that's why he's hated so much by the Nordic people, the ancient Nordic people. However, my personal view of him is more forgiving. I certainly would never pray to Loki, because Loki is described, whenever you read any of the ancient Eddas or poems, okay, of the Nordic stories. You'll always hear Loki described as the good that can do both, the god who can do both good and evil. He's capable of both in equal measure. But that's the point. He's capable of both in equal measure. He's neither evil nor evil. He's neither good. And evil and good, those kind of terms don't really exist in a polytheistic religion. But to him, they kind of do. He does bad shit. And he does good shit. And he doesn't do that much of the in-between, to be honest. He does one or the other. He kind of flips. And he does a lot of stuff in the middle as well, obviously, during sort of everyday life. But he does some really tremendously good acts and tremendously bad acts that have significant impacts on the lives of the gods and of the men of Midgard. And he's a very important character for a god as a result within all this, because he actually impacts possibly on the world. His actions do have cause and effect, so to speak. Not always for the good, as I say. And so I would never pray to Loki, because he's capable of answering your prayers, but he's also capable of answering your prayers in the complete opposite manner in which you would want your prayers answered. And he would do it not out of spite, but just sometimes he's a bit random in that sense. But he's often described as the god of mischief, but I think that's wrong. He's not the god of mischief. He's the god of luck. Luck can be good luck or bad luck. You can go through a period of time where you go, oh, I've had a really lucky week, I feel so good, and I don't mean just gambling and stuff. You just feel really, really lucky. Things just seem to go your way when things were on a knife edge. They always went your way, and you end up having a fantastic time, or getting a lot more out of life than what you expected. But then you've also got bad luck that can last a lifetime sometimes. You've got bad luck that is the complete opposite. It fucks you up. No matter how much you try, no matter how much effort you put in, you always end up messing up, and that's bad luck. And so for me, Loki is the god of luck. Why? Because luck does both good and bad. It is completely neutral, just like the fates. Luck is completely neutral, except unlike the fates that just simply don't get involved. Well, they're directly involved. They're just like you live, you die, that's it, kind of thing. And the fates aren't a god. It's an animate. It's just a force. How can gravity be good or evil? Yes, it kills people when they fall out off big heights. It doesn't mean it's evil. Fate cannot be evil simply because it's a force that governs you and takes you to your death eventually. It's not evil for that. It's also not good because it gives you life at the beginning. You're fated to be born. It's just a force. You are born and you die. So fate cannot be good nor evil. But at the same time, luck can neither be good nor evil. In many ways, it's a force of its own kind. But I believe that luck is actually Loki, or at least his influence on the world. And so that's my interpretation, my personal interpretation of Loki, is that when I have good luck, I might thank Loki. I thanked him once and once only in my life, when I survived the car crash that I didn't think I was going to survive, because I remember thinking that I had nothing at all to no reason at all to still be alive when I walked out of that car crash, except I must have had some fucking good luck behind me at the time. I was unlucky to get hit. What chances are there to be in a car crash, especially when you're stationary in traffic? What are the chances of being hit at high speeds by a truck carrying 20 odd 30 tons of total weight? That's bad luck. But it was countered by the good luck of walking out almost unscathed. You understand what I'm saying? Luck is both bad and good. It is neutral. It can't be bad, it can't be good, it's completely neutral, because in the end it always balances itself out. And I think really Loki represents that luck. Now, whether his influence and his luck at the end, so you could argue, you could go, well, hang on a minute, he brings along Ragnarok, so surely he's weighted towards the bad side of luck quite heavily, because he brings about the destruction of everything. I would say no, that's a natural process. Just like birth and just like death, these are not good or evil things either. They are simply events, a product of fate. Ragnarok itself is just simply the product of fate, and Loki is one of the tools used by the fates to bring along, or the tools that fate sort of pulls along and uses to bring along Ragnarok at the time when Ragnarok should occur. That's the way I see it. Loki is simply a tool of fate. His neutral luck, the fact that he causes good and bad, he just brings it along, and that is one reason why I think even his mother is of complete, literally all the texts are silent. They will not mention but his mother, what his mother is, whether she's a goddess, whether she's a giantess, whether she's a dwarf or an elf, whether she's a human or whether she's a Norn. Yeah, they don't mention anything, and they make a sort of purposeful sort of diversion not to answer that question. And I believe that the reason that question's never answered is because, this is my particular insight, is because his mother was a Norn, and he was kind of planted within the Asgardians, or even maybe Odin was probably aware. Odin was wise, remember. Maybe Odin was involved. Maybe Odin was aware of Loki's inheritance, and, as I say, protected him and harboured him until Ragnarok came. That's my insight into it anyway, guys. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you soon.